Hello. My camera seems higher up than normal. Yeah, I made it a little earlier, mostly because it seems like a lot of the viewers are from Europe. You guys are quite welcome. Oh, I forgot to start playing music. Background. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to give it a few minutes until more people show up. As you can tell, the dog cam is in a different spot with a different dog today. Let's see. Normally when I'm just randomly talking, she gets up and comes over here to bother me. So, like I said, just going to give it a few more minutes and we'll get started. Yeah, it's 7 o'clock in the UK, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, somewhere around that in mid-Europe, right? I'm going to give it one more minute, and then we'll jump into Lightroom, figure out what we want to do. Appreciate you guys all joining. It's been a little bit since I've had a live stream, and it'll probably be a little bit until I have another one after this, but I'll probably talk about that during the stream. All right. I'm pretty sure. Okay. I think everything looks right here. Let me make sure. Yeah, I think we're good. Hey, Brian, how's it going? Thanks, Steve, for the compliment. I'll let her know. I hope you guys can hear me well. I feel like I'm rusty. It's been a couple weeks. So I didn't get a ton of submissions this time around. Not entirely sure if it's because I stopped streaming on a consistent basis for a little bit. Also, I think just in terms of YouTube, it tends to be that people are excited when they first start following you, and then they may get busy doing other stuff. They don't shoot photography as much, yada, yada, yada. Still glad I got some submissions. If you're just joining and you want to submit, the details are in the description. But for the most part, it takes a little bit of time to add more photos to Lightroom and get them named correctly. However, if I do have the time and you didn't submit any photos and you still want to, feel free to email them now. I'm not entirely sure I'll be able to get to them, but I might take like a 5-minute break, add some into Lightroom, and start again if we need more time. So the first image I'm going to start with is Falco's. Both Falco and Levi are members of my channel, which if you guys are interested, you can hit the join button down below and check it out. No pressure, but I told them that I would do their images first, although I think Levi said he was in a meeting, so I might wait. Realistically, I'll probably be able to at least talk about every image that I got, so hopefully. We're going to start with this one. This is from Falco. And I think he said he wanted me to both critique it and edit it. And I'm going to start by critiquing it. Because a lot of the times when I get images that are unedited for critique, it's more about the moment it was captured and how it was captured and stuff like that. And if I get photos that are already edited, it's about both the image you captured and the edit, right? So in this particular image, there's a lot to like. I will say, and it could just be, so something that's really hard to tell when you first open an image, especially one you didn't take, where I wasn't there. A lot of the times it can be hard to tell what the actual colors were, depending on what kind of camera took the photo, the raw processing. And what I mean by that is just, if I look at my images without any processing, sometimes they just look super flat and dull. That doesn't necessarily mean there wasn't a lot of vibrance or color or just anything in the image. It just means that that's how it was captured, raw. So something I'm going to do really quick before I actually critique this particular image is just add some contrast to it and change some color settings just to see what these colors on the horizon actually look like. Because the first thing that I notice about this is that the image lacks a little bit of atmosphere. Like, I love tones in the sky that go from, you know, that typical burn off right before sunrise or right after sunset. Yeah, we're starting with you, Falco. And I feel like this particular composition is great. You have a lot of texture in the foreground, but the cool thing about this texture is that it's not too distracting, but it's almost an element of the image. And I think that's always hard to balance, is that a lot of the times you want something in your foreground that not only you can look at, but also isn't distracting to what you're trying to take a photo of. Hey, Roberto, how's it going? But I will say, in terms of this moment being captured, I wish there was just a little bit more color in the sky. And I'm not saying that the color that's here is bad. I'm saying I want more of it. That's what I would want. The other thing is, you have to decide, you know, this is always going to come down to the artist and the photographer. These boats here, do they add something to the image? I think leaving this boat here would be fine, but because this boat is cut off on the left-hand side, I probably wouldn't want it in the image. That's not to say I might not want one in like a, I'm getting super detailed here, but if there was a boat here and a boat here, and then one boat that was cut off on the side, I think I'd be okay with it. But because there's only this one and then just one cut off, the balance doesn't seem right to me. So that's something I would probably either try to Photoshop out or just wait another moment for it to get back in. Yeah, I'm assuming it did look more colorful. And it will probably come to life in the edit. So those are just the two things that I really noticed that I would want. When I look at an image, I say, what do I want? Excuse me, better in the image. And those are the two things that I would want if I were to go back to this location. Some other stuff is, it's possible that this image should have been exposure bracketed, just because the detail in these shadows, we can probably recover some. Yeah, we can recover most. I take back what I just said. Technology is crazy. But if you wanted extra detail, you know, if you wanted less grainy shadows, you could have exposure bracketed. You might have, and you only sent me one, Falco. But that's just something. I didn't even notice there was a little guy right there. Okay, let's actually start with the edit, and probably a few more things about the image will come to life. So I'm just going to start by adding contrast, even though it's pretty contrasty, because I know that I'm going to want contrast in the image, and by adding the contrast, I can see that it's too dark, so that's the next step. So add some contrast and say, okay, the image is too dark. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, again, I don't mind having a boat cut off. I think if there was another boat here, or they were closer together, almost as if you could see that that's where they're coming from. But because the distance between them, I feel like this is slightly distracting. And I don't think it would be too hard to edit out, but maybe. Okay, so we've added some contrast. I'm going to bring up the shadows a bit, because that's obviously where a lot of this image lies. A lot of the detail in this image is in the shadows. But I think before that, let's just bring up the exposure. Because I'm looking at my histogram here, and you can tell that we have a lot of room to get those whites up. Now, I have to be a little careful here because most of the sky is white. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm going to bring up the shadows a bit. This is probably not where I'm going to leave them. I think I don't want them too bright. Let's go Adobe Landscape. That profile is really going to bring out some color. You could also typically just add blue saturation. We are working with a Fuji X-T3, so those calibration settings are going to affect the camera a little bit differently than, let's say, a Nikon or a Canon. I'm actually going to do both because I think typically this is too much where I do Adobe Landscape and blue saturation, but I really think that the image was dull enough in the raw that we have a lot of room to play around with it. So this is something I might adjust later if it gets too saturated, and I'll go from there. Resolution image issues. JD, are you having problems with the stream? Oh, did somebody donate? Oh, Ivan, thank you for the donation, man. All right, so next up, we've kind of brought some color and definitely some detail back to this image. And I probably should have white balance previous, before you start. A lot of the times that's one of the first things you do. The only problem is when I'm trying to white balance an image that looks like this, that is pretty flat, it's actually hard for me to tell what direction I want to go, if I want it warmer or cooler. So don't hesitate to make some adjustments and then go back and edit your white balance. So for example, if we wanted it cooler, I think this is a perfectly good look. If you're going for a look where the sky is going to be more blue, and if we wanted just a touch warmer, we could do that. I actually think the default 6500 is actually probably a little bit too warm, and I'm going to cool it off just a little bit. Probably 6100. It's blurry. Is the stream blurry for anyone else? I have it up on my screen. Let me try 1080p and see if it... No, it looks fine for me. I'm not sure. So let me know if the stream messes up or something like that. Because I'm actually breaking the rules a little bit. You're not supposed to be able to do 1440p at ultra low latency. And I just force it and it allows me to do it. So lost the stream. Let me refresh. Make sure I'm still here. Okay. On my end, I'm still here. So Brian, sorry you lost the stream. I don't know what happened. Okay. Back to the photo. So something else that you should try when an image doesn't necessarily have as much color, or maybe the colors aren't really adding anything to the image. In this particular image, I do like the colors, but I just wanted to point out, you can always try black and white. But I usually don't do that unless I have like a reason, like I'm deliberately doing it. In this case, I would edit this photo a little bit different, and I would probably bring down the blues, something like that. But I'm not even going to attempt a black and white. I just wanted to mention it because this particular photo, because of all these textures in the foreground, could do well in a black and white. But I really like the colors, so we're going to stick with that. Now, I'm not going to take the time to take this into Photoshop and remove this, but just imagine that I did. I mean, I could try to spot tool it, but I don't think Lightroom's going to be able to do this efficiently enough, but I'll give it a shot. Okay. Why didn't it? What is that little spot? I mean, that's good enough. But why on earth is there a spot there? Okay, let me try this again. That's good enough for this live edit. Obviously, if I was doing this to put in my portfolio, post online, I would take a little bit more time, but that is good enough for me. So a few other things is that I can approach is dehaze, specifically in this image, is going to add more saturation and contrast to those tones in the sky. So I'll show you really quick. So if I increase this, those colors are really going to start to pop. And I don't necessarily want that. You'll also notice that that little, I think, smokestack that was coming out of that boat is still there. As much as I want those colors to be there, I really like the pastel feel of the sky. And that's kind of what I'm going for. So I'm not going to bump this up very much, maybe just like 5 and leave it at that. The other thing to notice is if I were to increase the clarity on this image, the things that are going to hit the most are all these trees and then all these tones in the foreground. And I actually think that this is more of an, in my opinion, more of an ethereal feel, and shouldn't be super crunchy. I know I'm using words that are probably not accurate, but they're the words that I describe for what clarity does. And so I'm going to actually remove a little bit of clarity just because I don't want everything to look super punchy. Now, I could get more precise with the clarity. For example, if I didn't want to affect all of these dark areas, I could just add some clarity into just the sky using, you know, a luminance range mask. But I don't think we want to look at it. I don't think it needs that, pretty much. So I think this image is actually looking pretty good. I think the next thing I'm going to do is try to get my subject to stand out just a little bit more. And I think it's pretty obvious, at least in my eyes, that the subject is supposed to be this lighthouse. However, it's not an image that really instantly draws your attention to the lighthouse. And I don't want to take away from the rest of the image, but I just want to ever so slightly, oh, not invert, darken the rest of the image. That might be too much, but I actually think I'm just going to bring the exposure up a little bit for the whole image. And that looks pretty good. Next thing is this area right here that doesn't have any water on it can probably be cropped out. And we're just going to bring the image. And the other thing is when I crop sky, if there's a tonal range, I want to try to keep the entire range in the image. So for example, by cropping down to this, I still have all the color in the sky all the way to blue, but I want to let it breathe a little bit more. So probably something around this. Thankfully, this is an image you can get away with different types of crops. So I think we're pretty close. It is one thing compositionally is I think even though this is technically right on the rule of thirds line, I genuinely think that I would like the image a little bit better if the lighthouse was like that. Now, I'm going to leave the rest of this in because I like all the colors over here. But I do wish the lighthouse was just ever so slightly more to the left, and you could crop it that way. That's just my personal preference. Other than that, I don't think there's a whole lot more I would do to the image. I'd probably add some sharpening. And obviously sharpening is going to be a little bit different on the X-Trans sensor for Fujifilm. Thankfully, you guys aren't ever going to be able to tell that over the stream, but just be aware of it if you shoot on Fuji. And I think this image is pretty close to done. I will say that this little, I guess it's not a tree at this point, dead stick, log, branch sticking out of the ground is a little bit distracting, and I wish it wasn't there just because you have this, you know, shore here that kind of leads your eye through the image, and this kind of distracts you on your way there. But it is what it is. You could probably spend a bunch of time taking it out if you wanted to. And I think if I were to take the image into Photoshop, I would move this guy as well. But overall, I think that this is probably pretty close to where I would leave it. I might make some more adjustments. Like let's say, maybe let's bring the sky down just ever so slightly. Not very much. It gives it a little bit more tonal range there. And we can just see the before and after really quick. Falco, I hope that was... Wait, what did I just do? Oh, I don't know why I clicked over there. Okay, there we go. So I will catch up on chat, and then we'll probably start with the next image. I think you could actually edit that out, by the way, Falco. I don't think this would be too hard. Mostly because everything from here down is all this crazy foliage, and that would be easy. Like, I'm almost positive you could remove this pretty quick if you wanted to. Yeah, anytime. Thank you for submitting. Samuel, yes. Sometimes I do it the opposite, where I will brighten the subject rather than darkening the surroundings. In that particular case, it was just that I felt the surroundings were a little bit too bright. Sometimes if an image starts darker, I'll just brighten the subject. It really just depends. I don't really have a specific flow of editing, like step 1, step 2, step 3. Obviously, I get into flows, but sometimes if I edit an image and the whole image is just a bit too bright and I want to darken it a little bit, I'll darken everything but the subject. Sometimes I'll edit an image and just realize I need to add brightness to certain spots, and I'll do it that way. Okay. Levi, are you back yet? I don't think you're going to be, but we can wait on your edit. By the way, before I start the next edit, if anyone is interested, I do have a membership you can join where you get access to a Discord channel where we get to talk about editing help. There's photo critique, stuff like that. There's a few people on there. The more people that join, the better. And if you just join for 1 month, you get lifetime access to the Discord channel. And the more people on there, the better, because my goal is just to have a community of people that just talk back and forth about photography. And I would love for you guys to join if you're interested. So you can check that out in the button below. There's obviously a few other perks like, I don't know, the emotes. There are things, you get icons for how long you've been subbed, all that stuff. And if you're interested, you can just click that button. It helps me out. And realistically, I really just want to get this Discord channel off the ground with more people. So check it out. Let me know what you think. And yeah. All right. We'll do the next photo. So I did not mark down which ones were critique and which ones were edits. So hopefully I can figure it out. Roberto, I think you're in the chat. So we'll do this one next. And hopefully Levi will come back soon because I told him I would definitely do his photo. Not every photo I'm going to edit, especially if you guys sent me your edits. And I think this was one of them. Roberto, I think you're probably still here. This is the unedited image taken with a 70D, and this is the edit. I actually think your edit, this is one of the times where I probably won't edit this image because I think your edit is probably close or better than something I would do. Now, I might change a few things. So the two things that I notice right off the bat, for me particularly, is I feel like your highlight of this area right here was in the right direction, and it's something that I would have done myself, but I feel like the shadows, the darkening in this area is too much. And what I mean by that is I like adding brightness here, definitely, but it almost looks too spotlighted to seem realistic, and I think I would have balanced just a tad more, keeping this area. Now again, you don't want to be able to like really see this area. You don't want it to distract from where your eyes want to go, which is here. But I would have just balanced it just a little bit more so that it looked more natural. That was the first thing I saw. And the only other thing I really saw about this particular edit is I think I would, and again, this is completely up to you, I think I would crop out the top just a little bit. I feel like this area, probably about 10 or 15%, isn't necessarily adding too much to the image. And I think I would crop it something like this, where there's less real estate in the top. It also draws your eye, gives more space for down here for your eye. And overall, I think your edit is great, especially looking at where you started. You took a lot of, you took a really flat image and brought it to life, which in my opinion is something that can be really fun when you're editing. And something I really enjoy sometimes. Obviously, some people are very much, everyone's got a different opinion on how much you should edit, what's viable and stuff like that. But I think sometimes it can be really fun to take an image that you're like, well, the conditions weren't great and things didn't turn out too great, but I was able to edit and save the image. So I think that your edit overall is close to what I would do. It might be a tiny bit more contrasty than something I would do, but I just think that the balance right here could be a tad better. So I hope that helps or doesn't hurt your feelings, but that's how I would approach this. The other thing about the crop is you can leave it like this. I just think, depending on where you're going to post it, I just think that the top part is unnecessary. And by cropping in, we get more, I guess, focus on the things that are important in the image, which is the sun rays coming down here and this spot up here. Something else that I thought about with this image is, weirdly enough, you could technically leave this part dark and crop the image something like this. Let's say, so imagine that this part down here is also dark, so you wouldn't see it as much. I wouldn't mind this image either. I actually think this image, this crop is really strong as well, because it really gives a focus to these clouds, these sun rays, whereas the original image, you're kind of trying to balance the two. And as much as this little brush is cool, it's not like, it doesn't have a bunch of color to it, and it doesn't stand out all that much. Now with your edit, it obviously stands out, but that's just something that you could do. I know for me, for example, when I take an image like this with my intention to be, I want this in the bottom and I want this in the background, I'll never approach the edit thinking, oh, let me just crop out this part that was important to the image when I took it, even though this particular crop might be better. Obviously that's subjective, but just something to think about. So, okay, I hope that helps. We'll move on to the next one. If you guys have any questions, feel free to, ask in the chat. I try to keep up as much as I can, unless I'm rambling on. Anytime, Roberto. I think your edit's good. And it's definitely the type of image that I think would stand out on something like Instagram. Okay. Who else is in the chat that sent me an image? Oh, Michael. I know you sent me one, so we'll do yours next. I didn't remember if you wanted me to critique your original photo or you wanted me to edit it. I'm going to do both. I'm probably not going to spend too much time on the edit. Let me get my Gmail up in case someone has sent me any images as well, so I have an idea if anyone has sent me any. Okay, Pascal, I'll do yours next. Okay. It looks like 2 people have sent me images, and I'll try to get to your images if we have time. So, Michael, I'm probably going to sound harsh here, so don't be offended. This image to me looks like more of a snapshot. So, and I mean that in the nicest way possible. This composition, this particular shoreline, everything about this image, aside from maybe I would crop out a little bit on the right, is good. It's just the time of day that it was taken, in my opinion, that doesn't serve it well. And that if you took this at, I don't know which way the sun sets. I'm going to guess if it sets over here, then if you took it at sunset and had better light, it would look way better. So that's my personal opinion on the image before we edit it. I just think that this is definitely an image that requires a better time of day, and that this just looks like it was taken, I'm probably on just like a family trip or something. That's how I look at this. And again, I don't mean anything bad by that. I have plenty of those images myself, especially if you're just having fun, learning photography, going out and shooting. You're not deliberately going at specific times or waiting for the perfect light. That's the biggest thing. I think if you took this exact image at sunset or sunrise, again, depending, I don't know which way where this image was taken, it would be way better, in my opinion. Or even if there was just mood or clouds or something. So that's the first thing. The second thing that you probably already know is, I don't know what's going on, but it looks like there's obviously a dust spot right here. But it looks like there might have been something on your lens here. So something to be aware of. But if I were to edit this image, because of the time of day it was taken, first I'm going to straighten your horizon line. Something to always keep in mind. And like I said, I'm going to remove a little bit of that right side. I'm not going to spend too much time trying to fix these little dark spots, but just be aware that they're there. I don't know if this is on your sensor or on your lens or anything like that. So with this crop, or with this particular image, because of the time of day it was taken, I actually think we're going to just go black and white. And I think that's the only way to really salvage not salvage. Salvage is the wrong word. I think that's how I would approach this image, because that's kind of what I'm not getting any great colors or anything like this out of the colored version, and I think black and white is going to suit it well. So we're going to start with strong contrast, and we're going to go from there. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, it's entirely possible that maybe like a cool, really thin, almost pano-like image would do this well. Let's leave this in there for now. Let's get this out of here so we get some more real estate. And let's go from there. So I'm going to, obviously we have strong contrast. I'm going to bring the blacks down a little bit. And I'm going to use 2 graduated filters to bring the exposure in the sky down a bit. And then I'm also going to use one here. And I might manipulate those more. And the only reason I'm doing that is to just bring your attention straight to the middle here where these cliffs are. And I'm just going to go through. Again, I didn't have any plans for any of these images, so I'm kind of just approaching them right as I see them. I don't want to add sharpening yet, because that tends to, depending on your computer, it can slow it down. Let's take a look at what decreasing the blue does. Yeah, something like this looks good. The interesting thing is, as I'm decreasing the blue, we're getting a little bit of those clouds in the background. Something else that's going to help with that is if I do dehaze. But I don't want the sky to be too dark, so we have to be careful there. But I can always go back and readjust those particular things. And I'm adjusting the highlights mostly because I'm looking at this area of the waves, and I want a little bit more detail. I want to be able to see that just a little bit more. That's kind of what I'm basing that off of. And now the image feels a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to brighten it up a tiny bit. And I think this is something along the lines of how I would edit this image. Again, I would remove or figure out what happened with the dust in the sensor, something like that. Okay, sunset. Got it, Michael. But this is probably close to how I would edit this. Again, I think I would try to just capture it at a better time of day. But I would definitely go black and white, just because the colored version of this, as much as it isn't bad, I just think that we're not really... Two things. I think the color isn't really adding anything to the image, and I think the black and white for this particular image can actually look really good. So something along these lines is, I think, how I would edit it. Michael, I hope that helps. And again, I hope that I didn't hurt your feelings in any way, but that's how I felt about the image. So we will go to the next one. I think... Hey, morning, Steve. New Zealand. Man, lucky. Pascal, I think you sent me some. Are you... I'm going to take a guess and say you're PD Visuals, yeah? Of course, Michael. And again, if you guys ever want more editing critiques or something like that, seriously, I'm not trying to sell myself, but if you just hit the join button that's down below and get access to the Discord channel, you get it for lifetime. There's a thread in there where a few of us have posted some photos, asked for feedback, myself included, and it can be really helpful. And the reality is, I don't even care if you stay a member. That part isn't important to me. I really just want people in the channel talking about photography, getting critiques, getting help on their work, that kind of thing. And I think it could be super beneficial to not only myself, but also all of you. So if you're interested in that, check it out. It's like $6, and you can just sign up for a month and quit if that's what you want. All right, Pascal, I think you just wanted me to critique your image, considering this is a JPEG and it looks already edited. Okay, so I'm going to focus on the bad here, only because there's plenty of good. Hey, Adam, how's it going? Do I use variable NDs? I do not use variable NDs. If I were ever to use variable NDs, I would only use them for video. But I actually did a video on these magnetic ND filters that I use for video. If you're interested in that, it's on my channel. But I actually talk about why I avoid variable ND filters. So, okay. Again, I'm going to focus on the bad here only because there's plenty of good, meaning there's a lot of things I can compliment, which I think is probably pretty obvious. I think the composition is good. I think the moment is good. I think that there's a lot of nice colors in here. Everything about the image, aside from just a few things that I'm going to mention, are fantastic. So the few things I'm going to mention are this image probably should have been focus stacked. Now, maybe that's a technique that you don't use, you don't know how to use, you haven't used, but I think this particular image would have done well focus stacked, just because there's so much importance and light, these highlights on the brush in the foreground, but I can tell they're just ever so slightly out of focus, and I wish they were in focus. Second thing, I think that, let me see, you shot at f16, perfect. I think that something that would have benefited was maybe shooting when the sun was still right behind this mountain, just to make the sun a tiny bit smaller. And something you could have done is taken that image where the sun was smaller and then waited a little bit until the sun was here for the light here, and then blended those two images together. Now, I know that everything I'm saying are pretty advanced techniques, but I'm assuming, judging by how you took this image, that you have knowledge of probably all of those things, or you're trying to get into them. And for me, those are the two things that I think would increase or make this photo better. Focus stacking, so that you have the foreground and the background in focus, and then also blending just two different times of day. I can tell that there's a little bit of ghosting here, meaning you probably blended multiple exposures together. But I do think that if the sun was a little bit smaller, what's going to happen is if you take an image right as it's on the cusp of coming over that hilltop, those sun rays are going to be a lot more crisp. It depends on your lens and that kind of thing, but your source of light will be smaller and it'll just look better in the image. And then if you really want the light that's happening in the foreground, you can just combine that image, this particular image, with the other one. That's how I would do it. The other thing that could be beneficial is I do think that the crop here could be better. Better is the wrong word, sorry. Different. Because I do think that, nope, I don't want that. I do think that there's a lot on the right and left sides that aren't adding a ton to the image. I am paying attention to where all the light is on this. So you could do a minimal crop like this. Maybe something along these lines. I think I like this better. Now, that's a very small amount. Even if you wanted to really close in here, you could do something like this, depending on where you're posting. So if I was posting to Instagram, this is how I would crop the image. If I was making it my desktop background, I would crop it like this. But ultimately, I think generally the left side and the right side can probably be cropped down a little bit because that stuff isn't really adding anything to the image. This makes us really focus on what's there. And that's pretty much how I feel. So PD, I hope that helped. I think the two things that would make this image better, like I said, focus stack and just maybe doing a time blend. And all I mean by that is taking your sky image where the sun is a little bit smaller and then blending it with an image that was taken probably only 2 or 3 minutes later to get the color in the foreground. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm going to take a second to breathe. If you have any questions, feel free. Anytime, Pascal. All right. Let's line up who's next, and we'll go from there. Whose name did I see? Steve. Okay, we'll do yours next. All right. So, Steve, I think you sent me a long email with a lot of stuff about these photos. I'll be honest and say I try to read everyone's email, but I don't always remember everything that was said. So if you want to refresh my memory, I'm actually going to bring the email up now. about what you said. Also, I didn't put your Flickr or Instagram on there because it seemed like you were on the fence about which one you wanted to use, so I just put your name. Hope that was okay. But, all right. I think I have a good idea. I know that you sent me 3 images for an, this is an exposure bracket, and then you sent me your edit. And I think what I'm going to do is talk about, I don't think I'm going to do a full edit just because you've already sent one, and I think that your edit is probably similar to something I would do, but maybe I think yours is probably a little punchier than my particular taste. Something to note that I wanted to bring up, just because I obviously, oh, you don't have to be sorry. I was sorry that I didn't put one because I didn't know what to put. So if you recently watched my exposure bracketing video, I think this is a great example of, and I have tons of these. There are many times I take exposure brackets when I really didn't need to. And Steve, I'm just using your image as an example. Again, a lot of the times I take images that I didn't need to exposure bracket. But I just wanted to point out that if you check out the histogram here, all the detail is here. So there is nothing missing in this image, this single image. We're not clipping on the blacks. We're not clipping in the whites. And everything is there if we wanted it to be, right? So something cool that you could do is, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because I noticed that on one of the exposures, this bright exposure, or maybe it's this, which one is it? Okay, never mind, I'm just wrong. But what I was going to say is that if for some reason one of these ice pieces of glacier or ice moved between your 3 images when you took these, thankfully everything can be captured in the one image. So you can always use your single image and still do exposure blending with one image. And the way I would do that is I would just right click this particular image, create a virtual copy, and let's say my virtual copy is my dark exposure, like this. And then my original copy is my normal exposure. And then I would just take both of these into Photoshop and blend them together. Now again, that's just an example. And one of the reasons, in my opinion, that you should exposure bracket anytime you don't know is because it doesn't hurt, right? So it's just more space. You can always delete the images later, and memory cards at this point are pretty cheap, unless you're buying like CF Fast or whatever they're called. So just something to keep in mind if you ever encounter, because I've had to do it. I think if you guys checked out one of my streams a few weeks ago, it was I'm trying to think of what image it was. It was the image that I took for my Canon R5 video where I did take an exposure bracket that would have helped, but on the long exposure, my tripod moved ever so slightly with my zoom lens, and that was enough to ruin being able to use the exposure blend. So I just did this where I created a virtual copy, used the same image for both, and then masked them together in Photoshop. So hey, Andres, thank you for joining, man. Thank you. Okay, so now that I went through that, Steve, thank you for letting me use your image as an example. I'm going to talk about your edit. So 2 things. One, I don't know if it's the, oh, this is a DNG. Oh, fantastic. Okay. For some reason, I thought this was JPEG. So one thing that I would change is I think this crop is too much. I like where you were going with this idea that you have like you basically turn it into almost like a pano, but I want just a tiny bit more room on the top and bottom. Why did it just do that? Okay, that's not what I wanted. For me particularly, I would want just a little bit more room. Is there a reason? Is it? Oh, I'm just going to reset this so it's easier for me to drag this up. Because I actually like all of this mood in the sky, particularly. And when you cut it out, I want to be able to see this. It feels like there's something happening up here that I want to be able to see. Now, again, I know where you were coming from. And again, crop is always up to the person that's doing the image. I just like what's happening up here. I think it adds drama to the shot. You don't have to include all of it, maybe something along these lines. But I also know that you were probably trying to keep that horizon line dead center and have this kind of mirror reflection. That's one thing I noticed, is that I like what's happening up here. The other thing I've noticed is I definitely think the image is pushed a little bit too much for my taste. So for example, I would never use, okay, never is a strong word. My particular style, I don't like things as punchy, you know, using like 70 texture, 50 clarity, that kind of thing. I'm not saying it's bad, but in my personal opinion, I actually think I like it a little softer, something like this. This is something that I enjoy more. And again, that's going to be up to you, the person making the photo. I'm not in love with this crop, so let me bring this down to make sure that the reflection is perfect. I'd remove this as well if I was going to leave it like this. The reason I don't, in this particular image, I think you had something like this. The reason I don't like all of that crunch or contrast, local contrast, and all of the ice and stuff is just because when I look at this, I see these deep blues and this reflection on the water, and I see all this mood in the clouds. And to me, that seems, I don't know, somewhat peaceful. I'm trying to describe feeling for a photo. And I just think that when the image is pushed this much, now again, this is a look that plenty of people do, and it is totally up to them or you. And it's not bad in any way. I'm just expressing what I would do to the image. And I think that I particularly like the image better when it's a little softer and less punchy on the ice. I'm not too worried as concerned about the mountains in the background. Well, let's see. I also want to try cropping like this. See what happens. I also see that you used a lot of adjustments here. You know, brought up the shadows, that kind of thing. I haven't taken a look at everything you've added. Okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't expect to click on the radial filter, and I don't think I've ever seen this many radial filters. And I'm not, Steve, I'm not laughing at your edit. I did not expect to click on this and see this many radial filters. This is awesome, because it's very clear that. So this, and I just want to comment. I think that with this many radial filters, you probably would have saved time if you had just taken the image into Photoshop and did some luminosity masking. Now, maybe that's not something you do. Maybe it's not something you've ever tried before, but I would push you to try it for this image. Because I think at this point, when you have this many little things that you're trying to manipulate and spots you're trying to edit with radial filters, you would save time, and it would look better at the end using Photoshop. So again, you didn't do anything wrong. I mean, every person has a different skill level or knowledge or what they enjoy when they're editing. Maybe you just wanted to keep it in Lightroom. I'm just saying that I think particularly with this much, you could have taken it into Photoshop and done some luminosity painting, stuff like that. And it's obvious that a lot of these are just pretty minimal. Like even when I'm like, this isn't doing a whole lot. So actually, what happens when I take off all the radial filters? Okay. I'm trying to see what your objective was. So something I'm noticing, so this radial filter up here, for example, is actually creating like a dark spot. And I think that this could be better served in Photoshop. And I like what you did here. So bringing out the tones here in this part of the ice and kind of darkening this part of the ice, I think that actually works really well. It might be pushed a little bit too much, so maybe something a little bit less would be good. But I think the overall direction you have is there. Yes. Falco, the video I have is called Focus Stacking and Exposure Blending the Same Image. And part 1 is just the focus stacking part, and part 2 is the exposure blending and they stand alone. So you don't have to focus stack to do the exposure blending part. I do want to do a more, I guess, organized luminosity masking video. I think I will do that in the future, because when I recorded that video, it was right here at my desk. I didn't really have a structure to the video, so it kind of goes on, and I just kind of went through a whole photo using luminosity masking, and I think I could do a much better job now than I did then. So I think I'll probably end up doing another video eventually. Steve, I hope that the words that I used and stuff like that were not offensive, and that they were constructive. And again, the only reason I laughed was because I did not expect to click on the radial filter and see that many. I actually think it's really awesome what you were trying to do, but I think that there's a more productive way if you want to push yourself to learn luminosity masking. And I think that if you watch some of my other streams, I do it on a lot of the photos, and you can get a really good idea of how much control you can get. And one thing that the limit to radial filters is that when I'm looking at this image, I can see the little spots that you adjusted, like here or up here. And if you were to take this into Photoshop and use luminosity masking, you have way more precision, and that stuff doesn't show up as much. So I hope that helped. And again, a lot of what I talked about is my own personal preference. So you take your photo however looks good to you. My personal preference is this is enough. Removing this clarity and texture, this is too much for me, and I think that this looks really good like this without any of that. Something else to note is that you could, let's see if there is one already here. Sorry, I'm just trying to see if you already did one. You could add a little bit of dehaze to the top. You might have already done it to kind of bring out a little bit more detail in the mountains. Other than that, I think it's pretty good. So I hope that was helpful. Of course. Also, if I ever need to show an example to people of what you can do with radial filters, I think I'll bring your image up because that is a lot. I think on one of my radial filter videos, I did like 9 or 10. And I think that for example's sake, it can be really powerful. But eventually you reach a point where you're like, okay, I should just take this into Photoshop. Okay, next image. Let's see. Who is here that wants their image, that sent me an image? I think I've gotten everyone that said something in the chat that I know sent me an image. And also feel free to ask questions. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything in chat. I don't think I did. Okay. I'm probably going to do Levi's image here in a second. I was trying to wait for him to get back, and I don't think he is yet. So it looks like I think 3 or 4 people have sent me images while on stream. So I'm actually going to just take a second to add those to Lightroom. Let's see. So if you guys have any questions, I'm going to add those images to Lightroom right now and just take a few minutes to get them in there. So let me do that. Here, I'll give you... oh, she's asleep. Never mind. You get my face. All right. It's going to take me probably a few minutes to download these and get them into Lightroom and name them correctly, because I have to individually download every image, put them in the folder, import them, and then give them the correct name. So it can be a little, it's not a big deal, but it can just take some time. So bear with me while I add these images, and we will get started again. Oh, well, welcome, DJJD. Why didn't it? Okay. Oh. Michael, I do that all the time. I actually still have probably tens, hundreds of images that are in catalogs that deserve more attention, and I haven't given them the attention they deserve. Actually, quite a few of the last streams that I've done is just me going back, finding images in my catalogs that I've wanted to edit, but just haven't taken the time to do it. So if you ever get bored or want someone to put you to sleep, you can watch some of my old streams, and that they definitely have some images in there that I just go back and retry. Well, thank you, Falco. I think it's one of those things that's hard for me just because I want to approach it in the most constructive way possible without making someone feel like they did something wrong, and more focus on what they could do better, right? So even when I look at my own stuff, to this day, I mean, I know that you've watched some of my streams, I'm like, I messed this up, and I should have thought about it or been better about it. It's those kind of things. Okay. I'm trying to talk and download the stuff at the same time. Let's see. But balancing that can be tough, and it's something I'm still learning. But I think for the most part, people that submit images are very understanding, and I don't think I've offended anyone, because that's kind of what you're doing, right? You're exposing yourself to be vulnerable to criticism, which takes a lot in itself, right? So it's not easy to send your images in and be like, all right, just tell me exactly if it's good or bad or not. That takes a lot of, I don't know. It's something that I've thought about. I'm like, I wouldn't want to submit some of my images to somebody because they're just going to point out all the flaws that I already know, kind of thing. So it takes a lot of courage, and I really appreciate people submitting stuff and feeling like they can have it on display and not worry too much about, feeling down about their images. Okay, I'm on the last one. It says people can't, Jonathan Muller, it says, you said you can't access the chat. I'm not sure why people are having trouble. I don't know if it's because you're not logged in or what's going on, but I would love to get that figured out, because more people in the chat is always good. Oh, hey, Levi. We'll do your image next. I'm actually just importing some other images into Lightroom right now that people sent while we were on stream. I was waiting for you to get back, so glad you made it back. Okay. This one, I'm almost done. These two. All right. As soon as I get this name added, we should be good to go. Let's see. For some reason, it gets rid of the creator thing in the metadata. I don't know why it does that. All right. We're almost back. And I think we're good. Okay. I'm going to switch to this scene, and then my dog is going to want to go out. So 1 second. Going to switch the dog cam. All right, there we go. You get the sleeping one now. Okay, let me catch up on chat, and then we'll take a look at Levi's image, and we'll go from there. Just, oh, DJJD, you're Jonathan, correct? Hey, Tobias, how's it going? Okay, cool. Steve, I've kind of wanted to get into nature photography or, you know, animal stuff, but I just haven't dropped the money on the lens. Now that I have the R5 though with the RF mount, I am taking, you know, keeping in the back of my mind that 600 millimeter and 800 millimeter just because they're so budget friendly. Lightroom edits get lost when you send a RAW over. It depends. If you send a RAW with the XMP data, it will not. If you send a DNG that has the XMP built in, so I highly recommend that if you want to send an edit. The other way is you could just send the RAW and send the JPEG. That works too. Hey Noah, thanks man. And welcome. Okay, let's take a look at Levi's image. Levi is one of the members to my channel. So thank you, Levi, for the support. And if you guys didn't know, I made these little, how do I, oh, here we go. Can I? Okay. I made these little emojis that for the chat that you can use. If you're a member, they're just little Photoshop things. I thought they were fun, but there you are. Okay. So Levi, what did you, I don't remember the email you sent me. You sent me the two images. You sent me your edit in this image, and then I think you sent me this to edit. So I'm not going to edit this one. We'll just talk about your edit, but I do want to look at this one because I think this composition is actually really cool. I think in this particular image, I don't know what happened here, but let's see if there's some data here. Whatever you did here, this got way too bright. I don't know what happened because looking at this image, it's not, you have all the data here and it shouldn't clip like that. But in your JPEG, this is, in my opinion, too bright. I like what you did with the crashing waves here, because if you look at this, I mean, it is pretty dull, right? There's actually no light on here. And I think you did a really good job of making it look like there is light here. I'd be careful right here. It looks like you did a pretty good balance though, but I don't know what happened at the top. Something else you could also do with this particular image is I actually think like a really wide pano crop where the horizon is dead center might look good. Something like this. Mostly just because I feel like this is distracting. I feel like this isn't necessary. And I think I like it more just with a little bit of the atmosphere of the clouds. I will say, so one thing I'm going to show you is if I zoom out, like I can see where your edits are. There's like a dark spot right here, and it's obviously brighter right here on the horizon line. So you got to be careful with that in your edit, because when I look at your non-edited photo, none of that is actually there. So I would just be careful when you're doing that. And you also feel free to submit the, hey Annette, how's it going? Feel free to, if you re-edit this, put it on the Discord, and I'll give you my feedback again. But definitely I can tell that you've got some radio filters going on here. And so I would probably pull back a little bit, try to balance that a little bit better. And if you ever need to, zooming out of your image, you can really see those filters if they're too strong. It's harder to see when we're zoomed in like this. Well, a lot easier to see when you zoom out. So hope that helps. I'm not sold on the crop that I did, but I think the top just, I don't know if it's your edit, if it's too bright up there or what, but I think it could be better. Okay, this image I want to take a look at because there's a lot to this image that I really like. Now, before we actually edit it, the one thing that is really cool about this image is the balance here is fantastic. So the bottom half of the frame, bottom right half of the frame is balanced really well with the top left half. There's interesting subject with what's going on in the motion in the water here on the rocks, and it perfectly leads your eye because of this line that just comes out of the water straight up to the subject that's in the top left of the image. And I think this harmony that happens when you're taking landscape photos is super important. And I think that you did a really good job with this image in terms of that. I just really like, I just really like the balance between the rock in the background and the water in the foreground. I think it does a really good job. And there is barely anything I would do in terms of crop. I would straighten the horizon line. It's barely off, just ever so slightly. And I'm past that. I don't think I would crop it anymore. Maybe a touch on the right side. I don't want to, like, just maybe something like this. But really, I don't think it matters all that much particularly. So compositionally, fantastic shot, especially, we should also talk about your settings that you chose to get specifically this motion of water. Now, you probably took multiple shots here, but I think this was a good amount of motion blur for this particular shot. Something I would have probably played with, and you might have more images like it, is just seeing what a 1 second or maybe 1/5 of a second exposure did here to see what the difference would be. Because something you could always do is take one exposure for the motion in the water that you want here, and another exposure for more crisp water that you might want in the background. Regardless, I think what you chose works and looks great. So let's start with the actual edit. First thing I'm going to do is Adobe Landscape on my color profile, because I can tell there's definitely some tones in the sky that I'm going to want. The other thing is I could see it was at overcast. So this is going to be a creative choice at this point. Where do you want the image to be warmed up a little bit? I tend to like my images slightly warmer, so I'm actually just going to add a touch of warmth. Not too much, but it's going to kind of bring out a little bit of the colors in the sky, and it's going to make the foreground a little bit less blue. But again, that's totally up to you. Something else to keep in mind is because the colors aren't super strong in this image would be a great black and white, but that's a completely different edit. So I'm just going to approach it with color in mind. The next thing I'm going to do is add contrast, like I told you before, knowing how much I'm going to have to raise the blacks. And something interesting that you'll see is the level of luminosity here on the rocks is close to exactly where I want it. So I don't want to bring up my shadows too much. So just ever so slightly. Now, someone asked earlier if I always darken the stuff around or brighten, or if I do it one way or the other. And I'm going to do it the opposite way this time. So I'm going to create a radial filter and brighten up that rock a little bit. And if you guys can't see it on YouTube, this is ice. There, I believe, is this Minnesota? If I had to guess, or around Minnesota. Okay. And this is not final, by the way, so I just increased the exposure here. I might do more to it later. I think with editing, a lot of people want set directions. They want to go through steps 1 through 10 of stuff to do. And there's nothing wrong with that in the sense that if you need a linear way to think about, I want to do this first, I'm going to do this next, to learn things, I think that's fantastic. But I think eventually in your edits, something you'll learn is that it's less of a linear line from start to finish, and it's more of a dance when you're editing. And that dance requires you to kind of go back and forth on a few of the things that you select, rather than thinking of, I'm going to do this, leave it at that, and then I'm going to move on to the next section of stuff. So you'll notice in my edits, I don't really follow the same pattern every single time. And a lot of the times it's more trying to figure out what looks good. Maybe I even have an idea of what I want out of an image, and then I go from there. Sometimes I have no idea what I want to do, and it just requires, a massage of going back and forth with the edit. So with that in mind, this is one of those images, because it's such a good image to start out with that it's almost like I feel like it owes a good edit, but I always feel like it doesn't really need all that much. So it's kind of tough to balance what I want to do and what I want to bring out in the image. So just keep that in mind, because I know some people always ask, where do I start? What do I do? Why do you do it in this order? So it's a little bit chaotic, but again, I think if you think about it like a dance rather than start to finish linear line, that's really helpful. Okay, so I'm going to remove some clarity because again, that's just what I've been enjoying. If I did increase the clarity here, you're going to notice a lot more focus happens on the rocks, and you're going to see a lot more tonalities in the water here, which I actually don't think is a bad thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the clarity down overall in the image, and then I'm going to make a graduated filter here, but we're going to range mask it for luminance, and I only want to affect the water. So I'm going to start off by clicking with the eyedropper, and then I'm going to hold Alt, and anything in white is going to be what's affected with the luminance mask, and that looks pretty good. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the clarity up of that. And it's not affecting it as much as I want, so we need to bring up the smoothness. And I think something along these lines looks pretty good. Now it's going to be hard to see on YouTube, so let me try to zoom in so you guys can see it. I'm going to turn this adjustment on and off, and it's just going to add, it's going to be, again, hard to see on YouTube, but it's going to add just a touch of more, I guess, definition here in the crashing wave or the flow of the water. And again, this is something that is left up to you, but I don't want to increase the clarity too much on the rocks because it's going to distract from the image. But I do like that effect a little bit on the motion of the waves here. So, okay, this is tough because I look at this now and I say, what else does this need? Let's see if we can bring out some more color in the sky. I think that's probably the next step. So I'm going to bring down the highlights a little bit, and then a lot of the times a good trick to bring out some color in the sky is just add a touch of dehaze. Something else I'm noticing, it's a little too blue, so I'm going to warm up the sky. That's probably too much. And I think this is looking pretty good. Let's see what happens. I don't want it to be too punchy. I'm trying to keep those pastel colors and not get too much there. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Something I want to do overall is, technically I could warm up the whole image a little bit more to remove some of the blue, but I feel like the blue is still just a little bit too much, so I'm going to actually come in here to my HSL and remove about 10 for now on the HSL. I'm going to go back to my filter here, and I want a little bit more focus on the rock that's in the background. So to do that, I am going to add a tiny bit of clarity to that rock formation. And again, it's going to be hard to see in YouTube. Let's make this a little bit smaller. I can see it affecting the wave down below. I don't really want that. And I think just a touch of clarity there is going to help. And I'm also going to bring up the shadows ever so slightly. And bringing up the shadows there is good because it'll affect the sky a little bit less, and it's going to give you less of that halo effect. So now I'm going to check that edit by zooming out and making sure that I can't see that radial filter I just added. You can kind of see a tiny bit that it's a little bit too bright here in the sky, maybe, but it's so faint that it almost just looks like that part of the sky is a little bit brighter, and I'm okay with that. So that's where we're going to leave that. Something else I'm going to do, I'm going to add another graduated filter, but we're going to use the opposite luminance mask, and we're going to select the rocks. And this is just going to give me a lot of control over this area. And I think I'm going to bring down the highlights, and I'm going to bring down the exposure slightly. And you can see that it's not really affecting the wave there very much, which is great. So I think that's looking, oh, let's get rid of the dropper. I think that's looking pretty good. So I think the edit is pretty close. And again, you can always check the black and white to see if that's something you want to go with. I think that this would look fantastic as well. But I'm liking the color version. I'm liking the little touch of color that's on this little island here. And I think this is pretty close to where I would leave it. Huh, that is not the bar that I wanted to adjust. Let's see. I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to bring the blue saturation slider up, but then I'm going to bring the overall saturation of the image down a touch. And I think we're pretty close. Yeah, I think this is pretty close. Yeah, so I was actually just thinking about that. If you wanted to add a large vignette to the whole image and just bring down everything, you could, but I think that I'd rather just use another G&D for this top right corner and then bring the exposure down. Mostly highlights, ever so slightly, not very much. Something like that. I think it looks fine. And that means that the two brightest parts of the image are the waves in the foreground and the rock in the background. And you could honestly use a heavier hand editing this image. I could do a lot more to it if I wanted to. You could get more creative with it. But I think simplicity sometimes works better than trying to push things too far. And I think the muted tones and the slightly desaturated look works here. Something else that actually could work really well is slightly raised blacks in the image, but that's obviously a creative thing that you'd have to decide. So really quick, if you want to take a look of the before and after, this is what we had. And even looking at this before and after, it might still be a little too blue. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to remove a little bit more blue. I do think that if you wanted to have a large vignette, you could. But I think the way we did it was also fine. Maybe we could darken that little spot. Little spot a little bit more. That might be too much. That's probably pretty good. So realistically, this photo, a lot of its weight is carried just by the photo. The edit is less relevant, I think. Sometimes a photo really needs a good edit. And sometimes a photo can stand on its own pretty much without any editing. And I think that the basis for where we started with Levi was fantastic. And I think compared to this image, this is just, in my opinion, compositionally and subject-wise, these two images are night and day difference in terms of the strength of the image. I think this image is just leagues better than the other one. Now, that's not to say you couldn't take this image, edit it in a certain way, and make it look good. I just think the starting point, this image was fantastic. So thank you for submitting this. I think this was a great photo. And honestly, it's something if I spent more time on, I'd probably keep playing with, because it's a photo that I would consider to want to put in my portfolio with more editing. So, all right, we can move on to the next image. Thank you again for submitting that. And again, guys, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but if you're interested, we have a Discord chat where you can submit photos anytime for critique or editing or anything like that. I've submitted my own photos and asked for help or what people thought. All you have to do is hit the join button down below, and you get membership to it forever, regardless if you only stay a member for 1 month. Realistically, it just helps me, and I hope that I can provide value to you guys. So thank you for watching. Thank you for joining in. And if you submitted photos or you're just chatting, that honestly means the world to me. So thank you. Levi, I mean, sometimes it's your image. So if you want a more saturated look, that's okay too. And even coming back to it now, double clicking on it, I want to remove more blue, but that's just part of the balance. Anyways, who else is here? I think that I'm going to assume that the 3 people that sent me edits to be done are still here. So Jonathan, Andres, I think I said your name correctly. We'll do one of you next. So I'm going to go with Andres just because it's A, and we'll go from there. Are you still here, Andres? Okay, Jonathan, we'll do you next. What did you want me to do? Because I think you just wanted me to critique these, yeah? Okay, Andres, I'll do you right after this because I think this is just critique. Okay, so we'll start with this image because there's more that I could that I can critique on it than the other image. A few things. First of all, I am not a product photographer or car photographer or anything like that. So take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. The first thing I noticed about this particular edit is there's definitely some kind of spot right here. I don't know what the discoloration is, but that's the first thing I saw was that blue spot right there. Compositionally, I think, I don't know why, but and this is just, again, I'm not an expert in this stuff, so take it with a grain of salt. When the car is cut off like this and you have, half of the car, I really want the car to be like perfectly, and again, I would not suggest cropping like this because now my horizon line is wrong, but I want the car to be cut almost exactly from top to bottom with no diagonal. I hope that makes sense. A few other things I notice is I don't know where I'm supposed to look. In this particular photo, I don't know. I mean, obviously the car is supposed to be some type of subject, but the edit or the way the image is styled, I don't immediately look at it. And I think that could be better. Those are a few things I would do. But again, I'm no expert when it comes to car photography. Now, this image is way easier for me to critique because it's more of an abstract image, and I really like it. It's unique. I don't think I've ever seen anything particularly like this. I love the tones of the leaves, and this is a great example of an image that was probably pushed really hard. So what I mean by that is, hey, Stuart, thank you for joining, man. Thank you. What I mean by pushed really hard is all the images, if you've been here and watching me for a bit, I've kind of emphasized lightly editing or not being as crunchy, those kind of words. And I think in this particular photo, heavy editing and crunchy is what made this photo stand out. So like these leaves here and stuff really come to life because of that heavy-handed edit. And I think it actually really works. Now, the only thing I would say that is, I wouldn't say it's bad and I wouldn't say it's wrong or anything like that about this image, is that my eye really wants to look at these leaves. And the center of the image is kind of this dark, muddy area that I think is between some kind of crossing train tracks, if I had to guess. And I'm not saying it's bad. It's actually probably what makes this image unique is that the vibrant colors, the autumn leaves or whatever, are on the outside rather than being on the inside of the image. And it kind of makes it stand out. When I immediately see this, I think, okay, everything I want to look at is on the outside of the frame, which is not typical for photography, usually. But I think it works here. And this is a great example of kind of breaking those rules and making it work, where the negative space of this muddy area is not what you're supposed to look at. It's kind of more of an atmosphere of the surrounding areas, those tones, that kind of thing. It looks like where two train tracks go to meet, but I could be wrong. Yeah, Jonathan, I mean, again, I'm no expert with car photography, so take my words with a grain of salt. But I think in terms of photography, I can say that I wish there was more more to note, like, where am I supposed to look? What am I supposed to be looking at, right? Obviously, someone mentioned the brake light, which makes sense. It's the brightest part of the image. But why am I looking at the brake light? Where am I leading to? What is the purpose, kind of thing? This particular image, again, I think kind of goes against all that recommendation I just said, because where's my eye supposed to look? But this whole image is more about this everything, the sum of its parts, rather than a particular subject in the photo. Yeah, this is a really cool photo. I might actually use this photo as an example later down the road, just because it does such a good job at breaking a lot of the rules of photography, but still being interesting, in my opinion. So, hope that was helpful. I'm going to move on to the next. Andres, hope I'm saying your name right. We'll check out your image. Thank you again for joining, by the way. Really appreciate it. So you sent me this. Looks like it's a CR3 EOS R image, and I'm assuming you wanted me to take a look at the edit. So I will say this is a particular image, if you look at the histogram, that has a extremely wide dynamic range. So might be a little tough to do the edit in one particular. Let's see how much detail we have. We should have plenty. And let's see what we can do. Okay. So one thing that's interesting about this image is I'm not sure if I want to leave the sky in or not. So the first thing I'm going to do is just straighten up the horizon line, and I'm going to base my horizon line off of basically the house, the little dock or cabin, and make sure that that looks right. That's where I'm going to start. But I'm not sold on if I want the sky or not. So what I mean by that is if I end up taking the sky out, I'm going to crop it a lot. Probably something along these lines, and edit the image like this, or I'll leave the sky in. I have not decided yet, because this could add some atmosphere to the image. So okay. This is a tough edit just because almost all of the detail we want is in the shadows. So what I think I'm going to do is brighten up the image enough to where we can actually start with a baseline. And then I'm going to have to come in here, create a G&D, and we're going to range mask for luminance, the sky, get a good idea. It can probably be even more strict than that, and bring that exposure back down. Not that much. Let's make sure this doesn't end up looking bad. Nope, that looks terrible. Okay, let's go back. Nope, that looks terrible. Okay. Okay, this looks okay. I'm trying to balance and make sure that the trees right here stay the same luminance value. That is what I'm trying to do right now. I'm also making sure that these tones don't get messed up. Okay, so now that we have an image that we can actually see, this is absolutely something that you should have shot with an exposure bracket if you could. Now, that's not to say that all the data isn't here for us to edit, but it would have been very beneficial, I think, to just shoot an exposure bracket. And if you have never shot an exposure bracket and you need to know how, I have a video on it on my channel. I just released it not too long ago. Just check it out. It'll give you an idea of what I'm talking about if you've never done it. Andres, thankfully, shooting on the EOS R, there's enough data here that we can recover it. The other thing about this particular image is if I was really going to try to edit it fully, I would probably take it into Photoshop and luminosity mask it, just to give me more control over trying to bring up these shadows and bring down the highlights in the sky. So now that we're here, let's take a look at how we would edit this. One thing I really like is it's obviously sunrise or sunset. I'm gonna guess. Actually, I have no idea. I'm not gonna guess. So the first thing I'm gonna do, add medium contrast, set my profile to landscape, and by setting the profile to landscape, you're gonna notice that it's gonna bring up those shadows a little bit more as well, and bring out a little bit of that warm color. And I'm gonna warm up the whole image because I kind of just like that feel for this particular scene where all of this golden light is hitting the trees. And for now, I think the sky is just too distracting. And I kind of just don't want it in the image. So I think I'm going to start from here. I'll leave a little bit of the sky in. And we're going to start from here just because I just feel like it's not adding a whole lot to the image. And I think that this crop is probably stronger. So now I can come in, create a radial filter, and probably, let's see. I'm actually going to darken the image a tiny bit, like this. Yep. And then I'm going to just a touch bring up the exposure on the radial filter here. I'm actually going to make it a little bit bigger so it hits a tiny bit of that reflection and feather it off. This is very minimal. It's very light, and I'm okay with that. Don't want it to be too obvious. I think overall, the lighting here is good, but I'm not entirely in love with the scene, only because I wish I could see a little bit more reflection on the water. And a lot of this kind of thing is just based off of where you're taking the photo. And it's just a photo that may have snapped outside the back of your cabin, something along those lines. And I'm trying to focus more on the things that are cool in the image, which in my opinion are things like all of these highlights on the trees, and just getting this cabin to look, you know, where it sticks out but isn't too bright compared to the rest of the image. So to do that, I think the next thing I want to do, I'm kind of mentally going through what I want to do with the rest of the image. Again, this is also an image that could be black and white, but I'm hesitant to suggest it just because I think one of the strongest points of the image is this golden light that is hitting the trees. Handheld on a boat. Well, that works. Yeah, I like the image. Don't get me wrong. I like the image. I'm just trying to figure out what I want to do to make it even better, right? That's typically why we edit. And I think even something simple like this, even if I left the image exactly like it is right now, this would be fine. But I think we can push it just a little bit more if we wanted to. And this is the kind of image that I might take a little bit more creative leeway with. And so just bear with me on this. It's going to be a little bit different than what I normally do. So I'm actually going to raise up the blacks a little bit on my tone curve. And I'm going to bring down the shadows a little bit more. And then I'm going to kind of play around with some of the tone curves for my colors here. And I'm going to add, I think I want red in the shadows. Let's figure it out really quick. Yeah. Red in the shadows. Bring this down. And again, this is going to be more of a stylized look, rather than trying to just do a straightforward edit. Something like this. I want to bring up the greens. Nope, that's too much. Ever so slightly there. Now, if I turn this on and off, you're going to be able to tell what I just did. I'm actually going to bring up the shadows a little bit more. Yeah. So I added a stylization to the image. I brought up those blacks, and then I added some red to the shadows by moving the tone curve for the reds, but it's super slight. Like that's not what I wanted to do. It's very minimal adjustment, but it has a big effect on the overall image. I could probably actually do it a little bit more. And then once I've done that, I also think I want to brighten up the little house a little bit more as well. I'm actually, instead of bringing up exposure, I'm going to bring up the whites. That should help a decent amount. I'm going to make this a little bigger so it's not as obvious that that's what I've done. Something else you could do is probably darken this little spot if you wanted to. And let's just keep playing with the image. I also could have done what I just did with the split toning or color grading wheels. I just have more control and more experience using the tone curve. So I'm just kind of playing around with what this would look like with touches of color in different areas. I think something like this is kind of cool. This is basically adding blue to the whole image. And I think something along these lines is probably how I would finalize the image. I feel like the raising the blacks and adjusting the tone curve like I did gives this kind of a mood that, I don't know, it gives it more of a rustic look, which is kind of how I feel about the image. Very much like a, I don't know, faded film look, which is obviously very popular on things like Instagram. There are people that their entire portfolio has that kind of stylization to it. So I think it's important to at least understand how it works and when it works for a particular image. So for example, when I went to Iceland years ago, a lot of the times it's just overcast and moody. So all of the image that I took in that particular atmosphere, I edited in the same way, like by doing a different look, or the same look for all of them, because it just worked with that particular atmosphere. So I'm probably not going to do a whole lot more to the image. I feel like that little bit of tone curve adjustments does a lot, but I'm not sold on if this would be the final image or anything. Mostly just because this is the type of image that probably requires a little bit more time. I'd have to come back to it and really just flesh it out. I do think that removing the sky is a big deal. You could leave the sky in. Like, this is fine. I just don't think the sky added a whole lot. And I particularly like being able to see all of the tones on the trees a little bit more by cropping in. So hope that edit was okay. Again, I know it's probably a little bit outside the norm of what I normally do. So there you go. Tim, you can go ahead and submit one. I'm not sure I'll have time to get to it. I will prioritize people that are actually in the chat though. So, hey, Andres, anytime. I mean, this is where we started with the image, so it's not like the final result is bad in any way. I'm just not. Sometimes it takes me more time to fall in love with an image, and a lot of my own images I go back and forth on all the time. Hey Bane, thank you for the donation. Thank you. I appreciate that a lot. Sorry, my mind is trying to think about what else I could do. Okay, we gotta let it go and come back to it at another time. So if anyone else is still in the chat that submitted a photo, please speak up. I think, Ivan, did I do your image? Oh, I haven't done your image. Ivan, yes. Hopefully you're still here. Yeah, Andres, it's not typically how I would edit, but it is probably how I would edit that particular photo, if that makes sense. Okay, Ivan. Did you want me to critique or edit? Let's just talk about critique. If you want me to edit it, if I have time, I will. I think overall, the biggest thing I notice let's get to the normal view. The biggest thing I notice in your edit is just how dark this little patch of, what the heck is this? Wait, are those chains? Oh, I see. Okay. That's interesting. I think I like your edit overall, except the island is just too dark. obviously you went for a more saturated look, and I don't mind it. I think the blues actually work for this particular image. I think the only thing I would try to do better is I like your crop. Your crop is great. I think getting rid of all of the right-hand side is good. Cropping out the top part and the bottom part to give this nice reflection that goes with the sky works. I just think that the island should be somewhat brighter. I will say you're kind of limited just because when I raise the shadows here to see the island, there's definitely a decent amount of noise there. And that just comes from honestly just shooting, depending on the camera you're shooting on. So I can tell that you don't have a lot of data that you leeway to recover here. And I think that this particular photo would have done very well for an exposure bracket in the future if you ever go back and take the same type of photo. And it's not even that I want to see all the details of the image. Like I don't necessarily need to see all of the stuff that's on the island. It just particularly sticks out to me that it's just a black void, even though it's supposed to be the subject. And what I mean by that is typically standard, in photography, the brightest parts of the image are what you want your subject to be. Now, obviously, all rules can be broken, and in this particular image, it's almost the opposite, right? Where everything around it is brighter, and the subject, or where your eye is intended to go, is the darkest part of the image. But I think just this little spot, like I can tell there's a bunch of highlights here, but it just goes too black right here. I think if we could just recover some information right here, that would make the image better. Yeah, I think just an exposure bracket would have made this image, would have sold it. Because imagine if you took a brighter exposure that you could blend and you could get all of this detail that's in these rocks out and make it look good, meaning it wouldn't have this noise in it. And you could blend that in, and then you just have a little bit more to play around with in your image. It's weird because I don't mind the silhouette look, especially for the bird, but I want to be able to see more of the texture in the rocks. And that's pretty much how I would do it. I think other than that, your edit is good. Obviously, it is a little bit different than how I would probably do it, but not far off. So I hope that helps. And for the future, again, I don't know if you know how to exposure bracket, but it's on a 7D, it's super easy. And my video on it uses a Canon system, and it probably is the same exact way. So, okay. Is there anyone else in the chat that submitted a photo that wants to see? Hey, Michael, thank you. Thank you for joining. If you guys joined, the details to how to join the Discord server they should show up right under, I guess it's like membership tab or something, and you just join that. If you have any problems, feel free to email me. Once you join the Discord server, you'll be sent to this welcome and rules page, and you just need to put your name down. And hey, Stuart, thank you. I see that you've already done it. And then basically what I do is I just add you as a member, and you get access to all the channels. And like I said, the more people on here, the better. So thank you for joining. It means the world to me. I really appreciate it. Ivan, thank you. Thank you, guys. I will say that I will be gone for probably, in the next 2 months, I'm going to be out shooting a lot. I'm going on like a 2 or 3 week trip, just driving around, and then I might do it again after I come back. However, I will try my best to always be active on the Discord channel, just because I really, really want it to grow. And I think that if I can imagine 100 people on there actively chatting about photography whenever they want help, would be fantastic. And that's kind of my dream. So thank you for joining. I look forward to you guys being on there, and I appreciate your support a lot. Seriously. Noah, there's a join button right below the stream, and it'll tell you all the details. It's technically a subscribe thing where you pay $6 a month to support me. However, the Discord server, even if you just subscribe for a month, you get forever. So that's my biggest thing that I want people to get on and be involved with. Okay, Michael, thank you. If you just click the join button, it'll explain everything to you, Noah. Okay, let's see. I don't think anyone else has chimed in that they're here. So Tim, have you sent the 2 images yet? If you haven't, that's fine. I'll do another image really quick. Maybe we'll talk about some images for people that aren't here and go from there. I tend to just prioritize people that are here just because. Okay. All right. We'll take a look at, let's see. I think these are probably 2 critiques from Grigor. I'm not even gonna, I don't even know that's, I know that this is his Instagram, so we're just gonna go with Grig. Anytime, Noah. And if you do decide to join, I really appreciate it. So I think these are 2 images that he edited and sent, and both of these are really good. So I think these are good examples of images that are pushed, and by pushed I mean they obviously have been edited. Like this one, I can very clearly tell has had some boosts and clarity and stuff like that, but it's not overly done. And you have to be really careful with moss like this because it'll almost start to look translucent. But I think Grig did a really good job of balancing that tone here. It almost is, it's probably maybe a touch too bright, but very, very slightly. The other thing that I wish was a little bit different about the image is that the color and the water in the background is a little bit off. And by that, I mean, it looks like it was an overcast day and that some of this water is just brown. That's normal. I would just try to, if it was me, I would try to balance the image a little bit better to get rid of some of the brown in the water. And you can do that by 2 things. You could either edit this image and then create a virtual copy and then edit it for just the water and then blend them together in Photoshop. Or you could just use something like a range mask, and that would help a lot do that. That's how I feel about this image. You guys can feel free to chime in. This image is less pushed, so it's not as punchy as the last image, but I really like the tones that Grig did on the rocks. I think it feels really natural. I also really like the composition balance. The rocks are almost at the edge of the frame, but they bring you right in and kind of swoop around for the whole composition. I will say the only thing that I wish was better is I wish this little hut house thing was just ever so slightly more to the left. So if, I don't know where you were standing, Grig, if you actually happen to end up watching the stream, but if I was just to move a little bit to the left and then take the same photo, I think it would have been better. Maybe you couldn't, maybe you were as far left as you could get, but that's the only thing I really notice. And I can't tell if the horizon is straight. Sometimes it's really difficult because the horizon can be perfectly straight, but these little jetties or whatever are coming actually closer to you or further away, so they make the horizon look a little bit off. But I'm sure that you probably balance that. But other than that, I think this tone-wise is a really nice image. Okay, Tim. I will take a look at it now. It will be some time before I do another user-submitted stream, just because, like I said, I will be out and about for an extended period of time, but I will try to schedule ahead of time. Also, I do try to give priority to the people that are members, just because they just know sooner rather than later. I post in the Discord that I'm going to be doing one, and that's just something that I like to give them just because they're supporting. But as you can tell, I have almost gotten to every image that was submitted regardless, so don't take that the wrong to make you think you need to join to get a critique. Okay, Tim, I'm going to switch over. We'll get your image added really quick, and then we'll go over it. Let's see. Okay. Did you send me the same image? One's just edited and one's just raw. Is that it? Okay, that's what it... Oh, no. It seems like you sent me... Okay, I'm just going to download them. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Hope everyone's having a good day. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the support. If you've donated, thank you even more. Realistically, just chatting is fantastic. Otherwise, I would just sit here talking to myself for 2 hours, and it would be really awkward, which I do enough talking to myself when I'm not on stream. So, okay. I'm getting these images loaded up, so if you have any questions, feel free to chime in now. Literally anything. It could be about, I don't know, basketball. I tell you, I don't know the answer. Okay. I don't know how much you tuned into, Annette. Probably just listened to me ramble the whole time. Okay. Importing these images. Tim, I hope you don't mind. I'm just going to do the 2 RAFs you sent me, the 2 raw files. Because the other image you sent me, I'm just going to do this one. Just makes it a little easier on me. If you don't mind. It looks like your name is already on them. Perfect. Easy peasy. Okay. Let's go back to editing. All right. So these are the 2 images you sent me. So it looks like you sent me... This one looks edited, right? No? Okay. So you sent me one... Okay, neither of these are edited. All right. For some reason, I thought this one was the edited version just because it had all the color and this one had no color. Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to talk about, I'm probably not going to edit this image, but I do want to talk about the composition. So here's something really interesting, is when I first see this image, I think that there's a lot I want to say. So for example, I think all of this foreground could be removed. And I'm not particularly in love with all of that. However, the one thing I immediately notice is how great this image would look if I just crop out almost everything. Meaning if you had shot at a closer focal length, how strong this like abstract image could be. So this particular scene I actually really like. I know it's very minimal, and I know I'm cropping it a lot, but to me this could be a fantastic image. Now I would probably Photoshop out, I'm going to do a really poor job of it right now with Lightroom. I'd Photoshop that out, and I would not have any of this bottom part of the image. So for example, I would love to crop this out, but I need it for the balance in the image that I want. So if you could imagine just zooming in a little bit more and just capturing this when you took the photo, I think this would look fantastic. This, I don't think is doing a whole lot for me. There's a lot in the foreground that just is unnecessary in my opinion, and it's probably nothing you even wanted in the photo. You probably liked what was going on here, but because you were shooting on, it says 7mm, it's probably not actually 7mm, but gotcha. Yeah, I think that this could really work. Trying to edit out the bottom part and maybe adding a tiny bit of dehaze to get a little bit more detail there. I think this looks really cool and would be a really great minimalist photo that you would print for your wall. I'm not going to go through a full edit just because, again, I think the starting point just needs to be better. And by that, I mean getting rid of all of the foreground and stuff. But I think that was really cool. So if you have that, if you have a closer image, that's the one that I would edit. So we'll take a look at kind of the same image from a different day. And again, I'm gonna point out the same thing. Kind of. is that the sky here is nice. And obviously you're taking on a fisheye again, but I feel like the right hand just does, right part of the frame just doesn't do anything for the image. I don't want this in the image, right? Because this is just kind of distracting and it's already on the right side of the frame. So, and again, this is just my personal opinion. My eye just wants to go right here. I just want to see this. I don't really care about any of what's going on over here. It doesn't add anything to the image for me. Yeah. So, and you might just be limited in the fact that your only wide angle lens is that fisheye. But if you could, I would try to shoot this like this is nice. I really like this. And I haven't even edited. Like this is just straight out of camera. And if we were to just do a quick edit, it would probably come out really well. One thing I need to do because of that fisheye though, let's see if we can fix it. Oops. Let's see. Is auto going to fix it? No. There's that little bit of fisheye effect happening, and I would try to straighten out that line. I'm wondering if I could do it with the guide. I don't know what this is going to do, so it could look like garbage. No, that's not what I wanted. Something along these lines. I'd probably do it in Photoshop, to be completely honest with you. Let's see. Crop it in just a little bit more. I'm going to change the music because this is not what I'm feeling right now. And then I would probably paint out this. Again, I would do this in Photoshop. See if Lightroom can do it enough. No, it's not going to look good. I would do this in Photoshop. But this particular image, and again, I've barely touched it, looks way better than the original in terms of I know where to look. I've got a lot of atmosphere. You've got a lot of great reflections in the image. And overall, I think that this is a pretty cool spot. Is this Netherlands? Yeah, the color in the sky here is really what sells to this image. And it really just gives that mood, that feeling, those pastel colors, that moment right before sunrise or right after sunset. And again, I hope I wasn't too harsh with my original, or suggesting to basically just remove all of the right-hand part of the frame. I just think that it doesn't add anything to the photo, and I really just want to see this. Netherlands. Ha! I got it. It's not like your name gave it away or the fact that there's houses on little jetties at all. Yeah, I really like this, and I like the tones. I would try to straighten out. And again, this is probably not only because it was taken on a fisheye, but also because this little piece of land probably comes closer to you and then goes farther away. So it almost looks a little ovular. But I would just try to straighten this up a tiny bit in Photoshop if you could. That's what I would do in terms of the edit. And then it really doesn't need a whole lot. Probably bringing up some shadows, maybe adding a big radial filter right in the middle to bring up the middle part of the shadows. Just a touch. Got to be careful because I don't want to bring up the sky too much. Something like this. That was super minimal, but I think that this is how I would edit the photo. Close to it. It really doesn't need a whole lot. It's a little dark over here, so be careful with that. Don't want to make it where this part is super bright and this part is super dark. I think the balance and the harmony that happens because of this reflection is important. And if you darken the left side way more than the right side, that balance will be thrown off a bit. So yeah, that's how I would do it. Tim, thanks for sending those. Glad I got them in while you were here. Okay. Let's see. Go back to my folder. Oh, okay. This needs to just be in here. If you guys are here and submitted photos, please let me know. Go back here. Set this And if no one else is here, I might take a look at a few more photos and then probably call it. If there's a particular photo you see that you want me to look at that I haven't, feel free to say something. I think you can almost see all of the images. There we go. You can just say the number. I think I've covered most of them. Let's see, who is this? This is a cool image. I'll take a look at this while we're just hanging out. I'm not sure you can send links on YouTube, and there is a delay between when you send me a chat and it shows up on the stream just because of the natural delay on the stream, but it's usually only like 10 seconds. I'm not sure what's going on now, but it's usually pretty short. Yeah, this is a cool image. I believe I'm just going to go by GMC. I think this is his Instagram handle. And this is one of those images that really doesn't need a whole lot. I don't need to crop it. I feel like the crop is pretty spot on where I have it. Maybe something minimal like this, just to balance this a little bit better. I don't even know if I would add much contrast. Maybe set it to medium contrast. Play around with possibly black and white, but I kind of like a little bit of the tonality in the tree in the foreground. And realistically, this is a photo that just kind of carries its own weight without needing a whole lot of... I don't know if you can hear my dog snoring, but she's definitely asleep. Sorry. I don't think this photo needs a whole lot, to be completely honest. And it's the type of photo that I look at, I'm like, what do I even want to do to it? You know? We could technically darken it a tiny bit to add a little bit more mood, and we could add some more contrast, and then just bring up the shadows a little bit to remove some of that contrast we just added in. Let's see what happens with some dehaze to get a little bit. Again, I mean, you could take this, like, so for example, we could take this image and really try to make the tree stand out a little bit more while keeping the mood in the image. We could do it that way, but we could also just leave it super, super misty and super abstract if you wanted to. Something like this would also work. I really don't think the image needs a whole lot. And there's multiple ways you could take it. And this is one of those, if this was my image, if I brought this, you know, took this image and brought it home and tried to edit it, this is an image that I would skip over because I don't know what I want to do with it. So sometimes that happens, and sometimes it requires me to just come back a few times to an image to figure out what I want to do. What do you guys think? What would you do to this image? Let's see. Maybe I should put Annette on the spot. Annette, what would you do to this image? Oh, did you send me the link of your edit? Ah, yeah. Okay. If anyone wants to see, this is what you sent. I don't know if this has the actual edit on it, but this is close to what I did. Probably a little wider. And then, you know, honestly, this isn't too bad in here, but it's a little distracting for me, so maybe I would remove it. But I think overall you lost so much real estate and detail with having to crop in this much that if I were to go back on that kind of mood, I would just try to have a closer shot. Just the two trees and fog. Yeah, I mean, you could do that. So, oh, that's not what I wanted. So you could take it where it's just this, which works. I don't know. I just really like, I feel like this tree in the background gives the image more depth. And there's just something about this little added piece of atmosphere that kind of fills up the right part of the frame. But I'm not against only going this route. I just kind of really like that tree. Just how it's almost leaning if it's too windy or something. Yeah, I think you could take this image black and white, and literally I just click black and white. I don't even think I would change much. I don't know. Like I said, the image just doesn't need a whole lot. You could try to brighten the trees with a radial filter. The only problem with that is it's going to, I think for me, I can see enough of what I want to see in the trees. I will say they look like they might be out of focus a little bit, but that's okay. And I kind of more like their silhouette more than I need a bunch of detail out of them. Because again, I don't need to be able to see, even if they were completely dark, especially in like a black and white. This looks nice to me. I don't really need to see a whole lot of detail in the tree because the shot is more about the mood. Something else I could do now that I've converted to black and white is maybe just darken this area in the foreground a little bit, so it's not as distracting. And I think something like this, I mean, I would print this and put it on my wall. More blue tones. So if we were back to color and we cooled it off some, oh yeah, that works too. I do think that if you're going to go bluer, like you're removing some of the warmth that's basically affecting the foreground, maybe just going straight black and white is the better case. I think this image is really strong in black and white. Yeah. Again, I think if I was going to go black and white, I wouldn't even have too much detail in the trees. I think right where they're at right now is pretty close. But I don't think I would need to brighten them at all. Might even darken just a touch more. I think the balance is pretty close though. Shadows under the trees. Are you talking about stronger lighting? Were you talking about this spot? Because I think I just darkened it. Yeah, so if you wanted to get more creative, you could technically have a big radial filter here that's kind of imitating light, like Noah just suggested. And you would just bring up the shadows, something like this, like that, and then bring down the decays to add a little bit of more of that mood. Maybe even bring up the exposure. And again, this would be something that you would choose artistically if you wanted that. So maybe that's too much. So there's a before and after. And that's just something you can choose to do, right? So if you wanted to add more brightness to the image that way, and then I'd probably darken this a little bit more, you could. But ultimately, when I looked at the image, I don't think it needed the radial filter. But that's just my opinion. I really like how it looks just this way. Super simple edit. I could add more contrast, but I think the level it's at right now works. I think it really depends on if you want it to be super contrasty like this, or you want it to be a little bit, the black tones and the shadows to have some detail in them. But pretty solid image overall with that edit. And excuse me, it's a pretty, this kind of image is great because it really represents that you can take landscape photos pretty much in any conditions. I mean, this is typically not what I shoot in. Now, obviously, it depends on where you are. If you have these conditions and there's no trees, it can be a lot more difficult. But this kind of condition in some type of forestation usually works really well if you can find the right composition. Okay, I think that's most of the images. Oh, I did want to look. Chris sent in these two images. I don't think he's here, but Chris, if you happen to watch, I think this was your... I couldn't tell if one was edited and then one was sky replaced. So this is definitely sky replaced. And all I was going to say is I like where you were going with it. And I like the tones that are on the right-hand part of the frame and on the rocks by warming them up a little bit. However, the problem, darn it, is that there is a bunch of artifacts or problems with your sky replacement. So I would fix those up, touch those up in Photoshop, assuming that's where you did it. And after that, it probably looks pretty good. But there's obviously errors here where the sky got replaced. But I think the sky definitely works here if that's what you're going for. But yeah, the first thing I saw was these little artifacts in the image. So if you happen to catch the stream at the very end or you rewatch it, that's what I would do. I think I've covered, let me look through the images. I think I've covered every image. Yep, I think so. So maybe I didn't look at this image. Philip, we'll take a look really quick. This is going to be the last image I look at unless somebody randomly asks me to look at some more images. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them now. I'll hang out for a little bit. And again, thank you for all the support. If you're interested in joining the Discord channel, just hit the join button down below. It'll tell you everything you need to know. And if you're not interested, that's okay too. Thank you for joining. Thank you for watching and chatting. Okay, so I think this is his edit of this image. Pretty simple edit. I don't mind it. I will say, in terms of the composition, there's a lot about the image that well, you know, it's weird. There are distracting elements in the foreground, but I kind of feel like it just kind of frames the whole image a little bit better. I think personally, I might crop in a little bit. I'd crop out. Let's take a look really quick. I like the tree over here, but it almost feels like an afterthought. Maybe something like this. So this is kind of giving you, it's kind of using that foliage in the foreground as a frame to the image. And I know I just kind of nilled and nixed this whole tree over here, but I felt like it was already not enough in the frame, and that I kind of like something like this, where the whole image just kind of feels like it's creating a natural window into this lake. In terms of editing, it's probably a tad bit oversaturated for my liking. And also, I would probably darken up the foreground slightly so it's less distracting. I would still make it where you can see it, but it's important, you know, in that way so that your eyes aren't immediately going towards that. I actually have a really good example. Let me see if I can bring it up. Let's see if I can find it really quick. Okay, so this image that I took of Hallstatt, I posted this to my Instagram. So which one is the final? I think this is the final edit. And you can tell that the image that I was working with in the foreground. So I have this swooping frame of the bushes here, but they're just a bit too bright. So in the final edit, I darken them up. Maybe this leaf right here is a touch too bright, but I think it works. And the fact that it's there, you can kind of, if you really want to look for it, you can see what it is. But I darkened it just enough so that it's not the first thing your eyes see. It's not super distracting. And here's actually the crop. So this crop is for Instagram, 4x5. And I think this crop is not 4x5. I don't remember what it is. But you can see that the intention of this bottom bush here was to frame the whole bottom part of the image. But I didn't want it to be bright enough to be distracting. And I think if you look at this image, it's kind of the same thing where you're trying to use this bottom half to frame this whole scene with the mountains and all the atmosphere. But it's a little bit too distracting just because it's too bright. So that's how I would do it. I'm going to read chat and keep going. Hey, Tim. I'm not sure I caught you soon enough, but I hope you have a good day, and thanks for submitting. How dark the bush is. Did I miss it? Oh, you're talking about right here. Yeah, maybe you're right. I don't mind it though. I think that this part of the image, this tree that's hanging in the foreground, carries enough of my eye through the image that it's not the worst. Again, there are things in the image that are slightly distracting. This stuff I would possibly try to remove if I could. But I think overall the intention is there. And I think that you just have to decide what you really want out of the image. Yeah, JD, I am not sure when I'll do another user-submitted critique. Probably 3 weeks to a month from now, and I'll schedule ahead of time and make sure that I'm home. Again, I think my plan is so I'm probably going to go out for a few weeks, and then I have to be back here. I want to say like May, I don't know, 5th or something for my second shot, my vaccination shot. I'll probably get sick and hang out at the house for a little bit, and then I'm going to go back out. In that time, I'm probably going to be trying to catch up on some editing, make some content, because I don't want to leave my channel barren for a couple months. I'm not going to be posting just because, again, my plan is just get in my car and go for a few weeks and shoot photos. That's what I'm going to be doing. So I will post the next stream whenever I get around to knowing when it's going to be. But usually the user submitted streams I don't want to do too often because they can become a little bit oversaturated. So my plan was to do one every month, but coming up it'll probably be every other month just because I don't know when I'll be back and on a normal streaming schedule. Ideally, when I'm back and in the office more and not out shooting photos all the time, I would like to stream twice a month and have one user submitted stream mixed in there. So maybe 3 times a month or twice a month, something along those lines. I don't think you can access the join area when you're on mobile. Or are you talking about you joined and then you can't get to the member access? Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying there's no join button? And then while you're responding, we'll take a look. So I think this image is really cool. Let me read what he said. Let me see if I can find it. Philip. He said something about this. He said that these were challenging and that he didn't like his edit. Well, Philip, I actually like your edit. I think that it does a really good job of subtly bringing down the highlights in the sky and stuff like that and leaving a bit of the atmosphere in the middle of the image. I think for me, I might just crop it a tiny bit. Now, I'm obviously paying attention to this Fisher person here. It's really, this is tough because I don't want to crop out. So like, obviously you could do something like this and focus less on that left island and more on just having your composition like this. But this feels incomplete and feels a little bit unbalanced. And I think you need this left part of the frame. So maybe it's one of those where I want to bring it in more of a panoramic sense. And again, I'm editing your edit in terms of the crop. I don't mind your edit. I don't know how much more differently I would do it either. I really like the reflections and stuff like that. I will say one thing I do notice is your sky separation and your mountain right here is, that's too zoomed in. You can clearly tell that that's what's going on. So that's something I would fix. I don't know if you had multiple exposures. If you are using multiple exposures, one way you could fix that blend is, this already has to edit on it because this is DNG, is just use the DNG to darken the sky and then create a virtual copy and then mask it together in Photoshop. I'm not exactly sure what happened here with your blend. It doesn't look like these are two different images, but it looks like your blend right here just got messed up, and I would try to work on that. I don't exactly have a set of tips to fix this. It's kind of quite a few things you have to use to work on that, but that's something I would fix. I do like the crop, the pano crop a little bit more, but it's not like the big crop is bad either. I just feel like the pano crop really brings your eye into being able to see this guy fishing right here. I would love to remove more of the left, but I just don't think it works. Yeah, I think you have to have something over here. So I could tell why this was a difficult edit for you. Let's see. Okay, Simon. There's no join button on mobile. I'll honestly say I don't know. I'd have to look at it. Maybe Master Wolf can check it out if he's still here on his phone, see if he can find it. If you can get to a desktop, obviously that would be the easiest way. But if you can't, I would love to figure out why there's no join button on YouTube. Are you in a browser or are you on the YouTube app? Steve, if I can do them earlier, I will. Noon my time I think is probably a decent time. I did a poll a long time ago to see what times work best for people, but it generally seems like a lot of my viewers are European, and giving them the opportunity to join in for their evening while it's still midday for us over here in America, I think is probably the best balance. Oh, Stuart answered the question. Simon, I joined from mobile, minimize the chat, and on the join link is right by where it says subscribe. There you go. Now, it might be dependent if you're using the YouTube app or watching in a browser. Not sure. All right. I think that's pretty much it for me in terms of the photos to critique or edit. I think I actually made it through all of them. So I'm just going to hang out for a little bit, answer some questions if you guys have any more. I really appreciate you guys joining in. This was a lot of fun. It's been a while since I've done a user submitted stream. It requires a lot of brain power for me just because it's really easy for me to look at a photo and think what is right or wrong. It's a lot hard to articulate it and say it in a well-presented manner that people can understand, especially considering, I was going to say I'm not an expert, but I guess technically some would consider me an expert at this point, but I don't feel like one. So a lot of the times it's difficult for me to say, you know, this is right or wrong. And many times with a lot of the edits you guys sent me, there is no necessarily right or wrong. It's, I would do this differently or this way. So even if you didn't like an edit that I did, or you think that I did something that you wouldn't do, I think it's always good to see how someone else would approach it. And I think that's the best part about doing these streams. No, I hope you can catch it as well. Thank you for joining, man. Hey, thanks, Steve. Again, I know I've said it multiple times for anyone that's probably still here, but if you're interested, the join button down below has a little video about what you get. The biggest thing that I'm trying to do is just create a Discord channel where we can all talk about photography, critique, kind of the same things that I'm doing right here on this stream, and just create more of a community. I would love for you guys to join. If you end up joining, I think it's $5.99 a month. You can cancel anytime and you get the Discord forever. So the biggest thing it does, honestly, is it supports me, but I hope that I can provide some value back to you guys where it feels like it's, well, valuable to you. So I really appreciate it. And I thank you guys for joining in, chatting, the few people that donated. Hey, Mazda, good to see you here. So if you have any questions, I'll probably be here. I'll do another 5 minutes and just hang out. So I don't think anyone else sent me images while I was streaming. I think I got to everyone. So that's good. Hey, Steve. Thanks, man. I hope I also travel safe. I'm going to be living out of my car. Might make a video. Well, I think I might, I'm not sure how I'm going to do it, but I might approach some of the content more of a vlog style and focus a little bit less on only talking about photography and focus a little bit more on just the experience itself. But I haven't necessarily decided yet. I'm not sure if that'll alienate my audience or not, because I know a lot of people watch the stuff for the photography aspects, and there would still be photography. I just don't know how much I would focus specifically on, I chose this composition or these settings and stuff like that. And a part of me wants to be more about the experience of being out there rather than specifically all of the techniques that I'm using for photography in every video. Simon, I'm not sure yet. I was going to head out west, but then Miles Morgan and David Thompson were in Death Valley, and they said it was already 100 degrees, so probably not there. I think I'm just going to head north. I think the biggest area I'm looking at is the Tetons, because I've never been to Yellowstone or that whole area. I'm just hoping it warms up enough so that I don't freeze to death at nighttime, and I have to figure out what to do about bears. That's where I'm at with that. Hey, Tobias, thanks for joining in, man. Thank you. Ivan, thank you for joining in. Thank you for submitting a photo, and especially thank you for joining and becoming a member. That means the world to me. Thank you, man. Trying to make this work, as it were. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going to end up heading, and I think I'm going to leave either sometime. I'm waiting on a bunch of stuff to get here. So I already outfitted my car to be able to sleep in with like a platform bed thing, but I did not have enough stuff to be able to go for weeks at a time. So I had to buy like a battery and a fridge and a camp stove, because before I was just using a jet boil, and that's fine for like a few days, but it's not enough for a couple weeks. Hey Brian, thanks for joining in. Thanks, man. I'm glad you enjoyed. And also, thanks for everyone that chatted. I know there wasn't a ton of viewers, which is perfectly fine, but it felt like the chat was super active, and that's really awesome, and I really appreciate it. All right, JD, don't scare me from going to the Tetons already. The biggest thing is just figuring out what to do with my food. I guess you have to put it outside your car, but then I'm just worried about, did I accidentally leave something in my car? You know, so that'll be a fun experience. Realistically, I just need to warm up a little bit. If it's in the 30s at night, I can survive in the car. Now, that's very true. Well, you'll either die or be fine. 2 options when you encounter a bear. Again, thank you everyone that joined in. I really appreciate it. I'm going to end the stream here. Hey, Simon, if you can't figure out how to join, email me and we'll figure it out. Or I'll email you. I think I have your email somewhere, probably. Steve, I went to New Zealand 2019 for 2 weeks. I would love to come back. I rented a camper van for 2 weeks with my girlfriend at the time, and it was amazing. I will say, photography-wise, it was tough. I don't know if it was the weather or conditions or what, but it just felt like I just couldn't get anything I was in love with. I got like a few portfolio images, but I want to come back because I feel like I did a disservice. Because it's supposed to be easy. So. But I would love to come back. I actually have a flight voucher for quite a lot of money that I could probably go anywhere if I wanted to. But it's the money that it costs to be there that I'm not sure I could afford right now. If it's a bald-headed bear, panic. Got it. Absolute dream bucket list. Patagonia is I think the last one on the top of the list. Before it was New Zealand, Iceland, and Norway. I've been to all of those once. I would love to go back at any time, and I think Patagonia is the last one. I have a bunch of obscure ones though. I want to go to Kazakhstan, and shoot there, But that place is much more difficult. There's not a lot of, I wouldn't even know where to start. And I only know a few photographers that have gone. There's a few other really weird places. Namibia would be really cool. Dubai, in the areas surrounding Dubai. But Patagonia is, I think, the next big trip that I would go on. That's not somewhere I've already been. I still need to go to Canada as well. All the Victoria areas, Banff areas, that kind of stuff I haven't been to. I would actually drive there, but I'm not sure I can get across the border still because of COVID. But that's it. Okay, Simon, are you in a browser or on the app? I'll take a look. Oh, I'm supposed to switch to this when I'm talking this much. Whoops. Yeah, both Norway and the Italian Dolomites are pretty spectacular. I did those in the same trip. I would say if you were to pick one, I would do Lofoten first. Not to dissuade from the Italian Dolomites. I just feel like the remoteness of Lofoten really gives it a different feel. It's really cool. Okay, on the app. I'll check it out and see if I can figure out where it is. And I'll probably message you on Instagram. I think we're connected on there. It's never easy, but it is enjoyable and fulfilling. So anyways, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for all the support. I'll see you again soon. Sorry that the streams have become a little off schedule. My life, to be completely honest, is a little chaotic right now. You'll probably know more about that later once I start making videos on the road. So I will talk to you guys soon and keep you updated just on my post on YouTube. I hope to get another video out eventually. I don't want to miss a week. I've posted a video every week for almost, I want to say 7 or 8 months, but I just have to accept that if I'm going to go shoot on the road for weeks at a time, that I just can't, I can't get enough done before I leave to have everything scheduled in time. So it is what it is. But my plan is to have plenty of content by the time I come back. So Ivan, you're going to love it, man. Have a good weekend, everyone. Have a good week. Thank you, Noah. I will see you guys again soon.